I'm Lola Greeno. I'm an Aboriginal shell necklace maker from the Furneaux Islands. I'm really keen to tell my story about my Aboriginal ancestry, how shell necklaces are part of our living heritage, which is really important not only for me but for my children and my grandchildren. So they have that knowledge passed on to them, and also for our community, so that we are teaching other women in the community who are entitled to know the story about their families from the island. I remember on a Sunday, elderly women used to come and visit Mum, probably after church, and then we used to walk to the beach, and that was probably our first introduction as kids, going to the beach with Mum. When we grew up and walked with the elders on Cape Barron to collect the shells, obviously we collected them for the elderly women. In those days we didn't actually make anything. Then when I moved over here, my mother moved to live in Launceston. I thought, I think we really should look back at what we've been doing and make sure I sit and do something with her, which I did. We made some work together, and it was from that my interest just started flying. The traditional shell necklaces were made from mariner shells. So our women like Truganini would have gathered the mariners off the kelp, and they would have had their very traditional way of cleaning them. They'd put them in a container and set them in a fire, and what they had to do with that fire was to create a smoke, so that smoke becomes an acid. And they rubbed the coating off their shells, which probably would have taken them days to have done enough. To collect these off the kelp, then I bring them home and put them outside for the ants or the flies to clean out the little shellfish out of it. That can take up to 8 weeks. Then I put them in an acid solution and clean them and agitate them, and only put a very few in at a time. Otherwise you're at risk of ruining the shell. The first thing that would happen, you'd probably burn the tip off your shell. Then once that's done, they tipped into cold water and rinsed several times, and then they put out to dry. We mostly dry them overnight. They were traditionally pierced with the eye tooth of a kangaroo bone, and they were threaded on the sinew from the kangaroo wallaby tail. But today we use a beading thread. This is a haul, like a tailor's haul that they use for leather. We just pierce a little shell in what I'd call the bowl of the shell, like that, and press, and you can hear it pop. And we always need to do that on a piece of pine, because if you put it on hardwood, you'll probably shatter the shell before it pierces, so that's why it has to be a softwood. And you would pierce your container of shells before you start, because you might decide that you want to do your necklace out of all mariners, so it depends on how many you've got cleaned and how many you've got as to what you can make. So your kit does influence what you're making. Some of the families, some of the women always counted their shells in patterns, and you can probably see that more so in these ones with a little beige shell here, the rice shells. They're very tiny. They could only be threaded once sewing needles came in. Our earlier women like Truganini couldn't have threaded those because they're so tiny, they just fit under your fingernail. So you put that little needle right through that tiny little bowl, and once it goes through, you cannot move that needle, because otherwise you're going to break your shell. You've got to get it onto your thread. So you can see how labour intensive that would be. My mother-in-law's family, Dulcie, she counted she might have 20 shells between, and that's her base pattern before she puts 2 little black ones on, or 2 mariners, and then another 2 shells, and then that pattern's repeated again. I suppose when I started making, I was probably more renowned for using bigger shells in my shell patterns. And these have become quite popular now because women just love them, and you can put them on and take them off and hang them over your mirror. And there's such a range of shells now. There's probably about 30, I think. There is supposed to be 5 different types of mariner shells around Tasmania. which would be, of course, you know, the top shell is that king mariner shell. Then there's a queen mariner, which is very hard to find at the moment. Then there's the blue mariner, and this is the green mariner, which is now becoming so very rare because there's just a couple of 2 or 3 areas where you can collect these now, and I'm just hoping they're not going to die out altogether. And when you talk about preserving the industry and preserving the environment, we do the same with our shells. We just go collecting, and I might get, you know, a container of these, and I try to make that do me for 12 months. I've been doing this now for 30 years, and that's how I become to win my National Living Treasure Award. So I'm very honoured for that, and I guess that makes me appreciate everything I've done. It's carrying on the legacy, you know, of our earlier women like Truganini. I tell all of my family, if you want to look at my work in the National Gallery, you know, it's in the collection and your grandmother's work's there with it. And my kids were going, wow, Mum, you know, really. I think it's about making that connection between, we take them to the beach here collecting shells, and then now you should go to the National Gallery and go and see our necklace in the collection. I said it's a pretty amazing place to be, and it's a big wow. So we're very lucky, I think, and that's, you know, that really important part of preserving the work has been in a good, well cared for collection that not only we see as a family, but people can see all over the world, you know, that they can learn our stories. And so our stories goes with these pieces. Yeah.